Hey there. Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab some espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 263 is titled, You Bring Value to the Table with Arthur Breur. Are you a flutist frustrated that your instrument doesn't accurately represent your artistic voice? We hear you. Not owning an instrument that will showcase your musical abilities and let your creative voice shine through can be frustrating. Let us help you change that. At the Carolyn Nussbaum Music Company, we have a team of flute specialists who have been working in the industry for decades, and they have the knowledge and the skill to help you find your dream instrument. They have a wide selection of piccolos, flutes, low flutes, and head joints to match your creative needs. To help you find your perfect instrument, call the Flute Shop at 972-985-2662 to schedule your flute trial today. Or visit their website at fluteforyou.com, where you can check out their instrument selection online. Follow the Flute Store through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter for the latest news and updates. The Carolyn Nussbaum Music Company is truly your one-stop flute shop. Arthur!
Good morning.
Good morning. You have my cat piano shirt on too.
I have the shirt that was the gift from when we were working together on the Ultimate Music Business Summit, and you sent the cat piano shirt. Yes, I'm wearing the shirt. Of course.
I love it. It brings the theme together very nicely. The Arthur Heidi UMBS theme. That was a really fun time.
Yes, it was good.
Yeah. So I think that would naturally segue into me introducing you to my listeners then, because you're not just, air quote, a random guest. You are a dear, dear, dear friend and somebody who I really look up to. And Arthur's and my path crossed because of our mutual friend, Dr. Garrett Hope. And Arthur and I have done so many tremendous things in the music community, Arthur especially. And I've learned a lot from him, but we have not yet physically met. And so we're going to change that in December 2023. But we've known each other now for like 2.5 years. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
actually,
it's been
3 Ultimate Music Business Summits.
That's hard to say.
Longer than 2.5 years. Yeah.
Oh, 3. That is right. My goodness. Time really does fly by. And so that was UMBS 2020 through 2023.
Oh, we met after the first one. So it's
Yeah.
been, it has been 2 years.
Yeah. But it feels like 3 because
Or
like
longer.
I said,
It could be like 10.
But yeah, no, the 3 of us, I think really just like Garrett, you and myself, like we really had, and we have a really great synergy. And after every UMBS meeting, I would always get off of that Thursday morning meeting and then run to Eric and go, I learned so much from Arthur and Garrett. And I would just brain dump because there was so much going on. And you guys were such a huge pivotal force in my development as an early businesswoman. And so I thank you for that. And I don't say that enough to you. So now I get the chance to publicly and privately again just say thank you, Arthur, for everything that you've done for me.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed all of our time on the meetings and so forth. In fact, I look forward to talking to you and seeing your face when we were doing these Zoom meetings. And it was kind of a boost of energy to my day, which, I'll admit, I miss it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and Heidi equaling energy. I think you said that very well. I will give anyone that boost of energy if they need it.
Yes, synonymous.
Oh, shoot. Well, I would love it if you introduced yourself to the listeners formally so that way they know of your composing background, your website background, all that jazz. And then I can pick your brain about bringing your value to the table.
All right. My name is Arthur Breur. The last name is spelled Breur. So it's 5 letters, and the last 3 letters look like Europe. And I have been a composer. Well, my parents say I've been a composer since I could reach the keyboard, because I would start playing music that I wanted to hear versus just playing something that I was trying to repeat that I'd already heard. And I started playing piano pretty seriously when I was about 8 years old, started lessons when I was about 10 years old. And again, I started almost immediately composing when I was playing piano. And my piano instructors had to kind of fight me to get me to learn other music, whereas what I wanted to do was create my own music. So that was sort of the struggle as I was going through the whole formative years of music. But my composing is based on 3 things. I always say it's the Muppets, because I grew up with Sesame Street and with the Muppet Show, with church choir, because I was in church choir from the time that the little bow tie that was on the robe went out to like my shoulders.
Oh,
It was
wow.
the cherub choir. It was called the cherub choir. It was very cute. And then my third influence in composing was seeing the movie Star Wars in the theater, the original episode 4 Star Wars in the theater as probably a 9 or 10-year-old at the time. And I always say my head exploded, and I decided that I wanted to create music like that. I wanted to affect people with music. I wanted to be able to make people feel things by this amazing technique of getting past, kind of getting past your guard into the parts of you that are affected by music instead of just with words. And that was that was a formative moment for me. But all those things really created what my style of composing is. And then I got my degree in piano performance at Millikan University. And also that included studio work. I knew how to work in a recording studio, but I could not get a job immediately out of college trying to get work in a recording studio, even just as an assistant or anything, because so many people are willing to work for free. I wasn't able to work for pizza or for, just for the opportunity that maybe I would be able to get a job. So immediately out of college, I ended up going into graphic design because that was another talent of mine. And I immediately started getting work doing graphic design. So that over time led to me having professional experience doing graphic design, lots of professional experience doing graphic design, and then doing presentations and doing multimedia work at Price Waterhouse in Los Angeles, which was one of the last places I worked when I was in LA. And I've started doing websites about the same time. Websites really started being a big thing in the late 90s. That was when I was working at Price Waterhouse. And so I jumped on the opportunity to learn how to do that. And I started working on websites when you had to hand type every bit of the website in, and you literally were typing the HTML to make the websites work.
All the
So
codes.
I go way back on websites. And I still, of course, it's a benefit to me because I have that technology in my head. I know how this stuff works behind the scenes and not just how to use an editor like WordPress or Squarespace or something like that. I know the nuts and bolts of how websites work. So, I was working graphic design and multimedia and then websites. And around 2008, I realized that I wasn't composing. I hardly was doing any music work at all. And I decided if I'm going to consider myself a composer, I probably need to get back to composing. So I pulled out all of the notepads that I had. I pulled out all these memories that I had of pieces of music that I'd been working on, started seriously working on creating music again, even while I've been still doing the website work and doing graphic design. So then kind of jump from 2008, we'll jump forward a little bit around 2016, I decided to promote myself in a chamber of commerce, both as a web developer and as a composer. Because previously I had just had my business in chambers of commerce. And it occurred to me, if I want to be a composer, if I want to move myself into doing more composing, I should promote myself as being a composer. So I doubled my membership in my local chamber of commerce at the time, started promoting the fact that I wrote music. And randomly at one of the chamber events, one of the people who worked for the chamber comes running over to me and says, Arthur, you need to meet Celia. Celia is a cellist with the orchestra. And that's the way she said it. She's a cellist with the orchestra. So here in the Portland area, Portland, Oregon, where I am, there's the Oregon Symphony. And that's what I thought it was. I thought they're talking about the Oregon Symphony Orchestra. So I'm talking to Celia and she says, oh, have you ever been to one of our concerts? I'm like, no, I haven't yet. I don't get downtown that much. She says, no, not downtown Portland. Here in Tualatin, the city that we're in right now. Like, Tualatin has an orchestra? And that became kind of the joke was, did you know Tualatin has an orchestra? And we actually got the orchestra to join the Chamber of Commerce as well to promote it. And the tagline for the orchestra was, did you know Tualatin has a symphony orchestra? It was a joke, but it was kind of a sad joke because Tualatin had a symphony orchestra. This really amazing cultural resource was right there in this little city suburb of Portland, and nobody knew about it. The mayor didn't know about it. So it's just one of those things that was, so I pushed at that. But Celia invited me to the next concert. She gave me a free ticket and I went to the concert. She had in advance mentioned me to the conductor. And at the end of that concert, I asked the conductor, this concert was all music by dead Germans mostly. Do you do music by living composers or local composers? Hint, hint. And he said, well, yes, we do. In fact, the next concert, there's a cellist from Salem who's coming up who has these pieces of music that he composed, and he's playing a cello concerto as well. So yeah, we do definitely do that. Oh, and in the June concert coming up, we have space in the program. So if you wrote something, we would play it.
Wow.
Nice. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And that was how I ended up composing what is the Tualatin Overture.
Oh, cool.
So an overture for the city of Tualatin that incorporates information about the history of the city into what turned out to be, instead of a 3 or 4 or 5 minute piece of work, it turned out to be a 12 or 13 minute piece of work. But it's a full overture with 7 different sections that talk about specific things about Tualatin. Cool. But that promoting myself in a business chamber as a composer got me my first orchestral piece. And that first orchestral piece ended up catching the attention of a local concert band, community band, that then wanted to have a piece of music composed for them. So I got a commission by a concert band to be able to create a piece of music for them. And that led to me not leaving after the commission was done. I was kind of the date that never went away. And I kept coming to rehearsals. So they started to ask, they said, well, would you be interested in sort of a more formal thing, sort of being a composer in residence for the concert band? And I said, I absolutely would. They said, well, we don't have any budget for an official position. Would you still be interested in it? So we came up with this structure of how a composer can work with an ensemble in a way that's beneficial for both. So it's still win-win. I got the opportunity to take music to them and they would play it at a rehearsal. And they, if I created a whole work, they would perform it. And they have they have a composer in residence. They have music to sight read. They have the opportunity to look at parts that might just be there might be a big mistake on the part, and they need to know when they're looking at stuff like that to ask questions and not just like play through it and assume that it's right. Especially if it's a new piece of music. But it turned into an official agreement between the concert band and myself, which is now the basis of composerinresidence.org. So anybody who's a composer who wants to work with an ensemble, any ensemble who would like to have a composer in residence, composerinresidence.org has the basic model of the agreement that we came up with. So that you can have this relationship. You get the benefit of being able to have an ensemble that will read your music and people who will tell you, look, this instrument can't play this part or can't do this, or, this is out of my range, or this is just really hard and things like that. And that's gold for composers, but for an
Mhm.
ensemble, they get to have new music and they get to premiere things and so forth. So it's a win-win situation, even if there isn't a budget for it. Not to say that you can't have a budget for it, but in this situation, there wasn't a budget, so we took advantage of that. And so that was, that was kind of I think it was a big, important result of that. But it kind of leads through all these different things of join a chamber as
Yeah.
whatever you do. If you're in
Yep.
business, so join a chamber and promote yourself to people who are not just in our music bubble.
Mhm.
And then look for opportunities and look for relationships that you can have with different people and with organizations that will provide benefit to both you and them. And think of those relationships in terms of win-win. How do you
Mhm.
both get something out of this? What are you providing to them? Even though you're getting a benefit from it, what can you provide to the other side of the equation? And that's been a whole lot of fun. It's been a really interesting experience. And because of that, the same model exists with the Tualatin, with the symphony orchestra as with that concert band. I'm technically still the composer in residence for both, although with some news that we'll be talking about, I am going to be stepping down from both of those positions probably, unless they are willing to have me working completely remotely.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Spill the tea. I have not heard of this update. Is there like a life-changing thing
There
that's
is a
happening?
there is a big life change coming up.
Oh, I
The
don't
big
even.
life change
Yeah.
is that my husband, Brian, and I are planning next year to move to France.
Shut up.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So this has been working in the works for a while now. Brian's his job is very stressful for him. He
Mm.
really would like to be doing something that rewards him, and he doesn't feel rewarded by what he's doing. And we have the opportunity through lots of good fortune to be able to afford to move over there
Mm.
and kind of semi-retire. So I'll still be doing a lot of the website stuff that I do. I still intend to do a lot of composing, and we're going to be doing a lot of tourism stuff, writing and podcasting and so forth. And I'm going to keep the podcast because
You
what I
better.
didn't mention is I
Yes.
have the Melodology podcast as well. But the plan is basically that we're going to semi-retire, move over there, and have basically this big life change and the opportunity to live overseas, which we've never done before. And he lived overseas in college for 1 year,
Okay.
but I've never lived outside of the United States, and I would love to have that experience. So that is the big change that's coming up. So if the orchestra and the concert band would like to continue having me be a composer in residence, I can send them stuff remotely that
Yeah.
could still
Zoom
work, and
calls.
that's still a model for being a composer for an ensemble. But at the same time, I think it would be good, I think, for those ensembles to have somebody else come in as a composer as well, to be able to
Mm.
work with them and give them you know, share the wealth. Maybe I can find an orchestra over in France that wants to have some crazy American writing music for them.
Heck yes. That's amazing. Oh my goodness. Congratulations. I did not know that news. That's a huge life event for you. And well, one, I'm already inviting myself. Two, there better be a room in your France home that's designated for Heidi only. Three, my next question is, am I going to see you in Midwest then in Chicago?
Yes, I am still
Okay.
planning on being at Midwest Clinic.
All right.
There's
You better.
very little that will stop me from going to Midwest Clinic. I mean,
All right.
it would have to be like a significant problem that would stop me from going to Midwest Clinic.
Well, knock on wood, we're not doing that. Because then I need to see you then at Midwest before you go and live a beautiful life over there in France.
Yeah.
That makes me nervous just even thinking like Arthur's going to go to France and I won't actually get to meet you in real life. But okay,
No,
as long as we have Midwest, we're
I am
good.
still going to Midwest. That is still completely in the plan.
Okay.
Not stopping that. In fact, right now I'm working on 2 pieces of music that I'm trying to get wrapped up to be able to submit for the readings at Midwest Clinic,
Mm.
because I feel like one of the more valuable things as a composer, it's great to be able to have a performance of your music at one of these events. But I think,
Mm.
looking at Midwest strategically as a composer, I feel like it's more valuable to me to get in front of the people at the reading sessions and say, here, I've got this piece of music that you can listen to in the reading session, and I can create music. I've got more of this stuff for you too. And
Mm.
to try and to meet the directors and so forth that are programming music for their organizations and institutions.
Hmm. Sure. Can I go back to the nugget you said earlier about the paradigm shift that you had with the small chamber of commerce, where you
Oh, yeah.
decided and you said, wait, I'm a composer? It reminds me of a time when Eric was working overnight as a manager at a grocery store for the longest time. And he had these skills of audio engineering, video editing, but he didn't identify and he thought, oh, I can't claim that identity because I don't do it full time or I haven't found that job yet. And I told him, I encouraged him, we were like newlyweds. I said, you know what? Like, you've been doing this grocery thing for quite some time. You have these skills. You have a tremendous impact with the clients you do have, even if it's very part time. You need to start seeing yourself and holding this role, if that's where you want to be to gain more opportunities, gain more clients, you have to start owning that title. And the minute he had that paradigm shift and he's like, I am, and saying out loud, I am an audio engineer, he actually then had more confidence and he presented himself in a different way, with a different mannerism to people and saying this with confidence. And because of that, conversations unfolded, relationships were built, opportunities came to him, more clients came through the door. And I think there's a lot to be said with that. And since you're nodding your head yes, I'm hoping that you agree with that. But for me, what I hear through your story is what you just said, like, I am a composer. And because you identified and held on to that, then you went out into the world differently.
Right.
Okay.
And again, going out into the world differently also went out into the non-music bubble in this case, because music
Okay.
was, I think of music as a bubble a lot of the time, that we talk to other composers, we talk to other instrumentalists, and we talk to educators and so forth, but we don't think outside of the vertical that is music.
Yep.
And that's why I say join a regular business chamber of commerce. Talk to people who are other things besides what you do to learn other skills, to widen, and going to a chamber of commerce also, you get the benefit of talking and practicing talking, promoting yourself, saying, this is what I do. Arthur, what kind of music do you write? My answer was always, what kind of music do you want? I learned that in the Chamber of Commerce rather than trying to explain to them the different kinds of music that I can write, which is a huge, range of music. I learned it's better for me to say, well, I can write kind of anything. And if I can't write it myself, I can point you to somebody. If you want a different kind of music than I do, I can point you to somebody who can write that music for you. So there's another lesson of working with a chamber or working in a chamber of commerce or any kind of a networking group. You can't just think of what it is that you do. The whole point of being in a networking situation is knowing other people that you can connect folks to, being a resource. So I became a resource for some music things to people who were completely non-musical as well. But that mindset of, okay, if I'm going to consider myself a composer, I've got to start composing. Okay, if I'm a composer and I consider myself to be a professional composer, which all professional means is you get paid for the work that you do. It doesn't mean that you get all of your money from that. You are a professional if you get paid for something. And there's different levels of how much time you're investing in that. But you're still a professional if you've been paid for one piece of music. You qualify as a professional. Maybe it's a lowercase p professional. And that's the situation that Eric was in. Eric was thinking of himself as somebody who can do audio engineering, but he wasn't changing the words around and considering himself to be an audio engineer, which he was. Now, maybe at that time he was a lowercase audio engineer, lowercase a, lowercase e audio engineer, because he wasn't trying to do it professionally and wasn't trying to focus on being that. But because he was doing audio engineering, turn the verb and the subject around, he was an audio engineer.
Yeah.
That's the way you have to think about it. If you're doing something, then you are somebody who does that thing.
Yeah.
And therefore you can identify with that thing. Now, again, if somebody is a full-time professional audio engineer, they may have a different consideration as to, how you qualify compared to them. But that doesn't mean that you're not an audio engineer. You're not doing audio engineering. It's just, how do you promote yourself? Are you going to go up and say, well, yes, I can audio engineer an entire feature film because I'm an audio engineer? You got to be realistic about what level of skill you have. But if you're doing a thing, then you are the person you can put the label of somebody who does that thing on yourself. So if you only compose like one or two songs in your whole life, you're still technically a composer.
Yeah.
If you only write a song once, you're still a songwriter. You may not actively be doing that, and you may not continue to pursue that, but yeah, you're technically somebody who has done that thing. Now, turn it around. What do you want to be? What do you want to identify yourself as? And imposter syndrome will come in and say, well, you've been, engineering audio for this stuff, but you've only been doing it on the side. So you're not really an audio engineer. You're just somebody who knows how to do some audio engineering, but that doesn't mean you're an audio engineer. Wrong. It's imposter syndrome is pretty much always wrong. It's always trying to make you think that you don't qualify for something that you imagine yourself as. But if you're doing it, you're technically doing it. So for example, the podcast, the Melodology podcast, I just had this great opportunity. Anybody who is a Star Trek fan out there who's watching Strange New Worlds, in season 2, episode 9, a lot of people think they jumped the shark on this. A lot of people think that they just went too far, but they made a musical episode of Star Trek. And I immediately wanted to know who wrote the songs. And it was very hard to find any information about them. I found a couple of mentions of the songwriters in articles, but I couldn't find any interviews with them talking about the experience. I'm like, they were the thing that made that episode really different. They were the one role in creating that episode that hasn't existed in every other episode. Well, choreography, I guess, but they've had dancing and stuff in Star Trek before. But the songwriters were the thing about that episode that was completely different. And they hadn't been interviewed yet. So I interviewed them, and the entire time, from the moment that I reached out to them to the time that it was wrapped and up on YouTube, because I posted the interview directly to YouTube this time, from every moment of that process, imposter syndrome kept jumping in and saying, you're not qualified to do this. Who do you think you are, interviewing people who are professionals in television music and, professional people like this? Who do you think you are? You're a web developer. And every time that voice came into my head, I had to turn around and say, look, I just did the thing. I just did this. I had these two people on the podcast. They were happy to be on the podcast. They were a lot of fun. I interviewed them. And now, after that, I edited them in Premiere Pro, did the audio, did the video, multi-camera for the first time, which was really interesting and exciting. And I did the thing. It's done.
Hey there, Flute 360er. Are you ready to elevate your flute playing and advance your career in the world of music? We've got some seriously cool stuff in store for you. Circle September 30th, 2023 on your calendar from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time, and clear your schedule because we're about to drop some career-transforming knowledge. We're bringing in a super special guest, Arthur Breur, but he's not just any guest. He's a composer extraordinaire and a web development wizard. We're talking websites that'll make your music shine online and open doors you didn't even know existed. As we gear up for a new academic year, it's the perfect moment to dive headfirst into the digital world and supercharge your flute career or business. Imagine having a killer website that screams your artistry, boosts your brand, and magnetizes opportunities. With Arthur's guidance, whether you're a flute professional or just starting out, this event is your backstage pass to owning your online stage. This isn't your typical event, it's a game changer. Don't snooze on this chance to level up your flutist journey. Join us on September 30th, 2023 from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time, and let's embark on this journey to success together. Just click the link below in the show notes. We promise this investment in your career is going to pay off big time. See you there. I can imagine with your personality, this was an actual external conversation out loud that you had with imposter syndrome, not an internal thing. I could visually and hear you say out loud, excuse me, I did the thing. Maybe? Yeah, there you go.
That could have happened more than once.
Okay,
But
continue.
so yeah, having this conversation with myself, basically saying, look, you're being really stupid. You did the thing. You can say that you are somebody who hosts a podcast that interviews people who are professionals in the industry. Why do you, I mean, and you've already had interviews with 17 other people about what you do. So why are you saying that you don't do this? Why is this thing jumping in your head telling you that you can't do this? The same thing with composing, frankly, and composing for orchestra and for concert band.
Mm,
I've done it.
yeah.
I have what is the official overture of the city of Tualatin. I composed a march that is the official march of the 44th Air Defense Artillery. So I've done these things and I can say, but then still imposter syndrome will come along and say, well, you're not a real composer because you're not doing it full time. You're not making your living entirely from composing.
Yeah.
Most composers don't make their living entirely from composing.
Yeah. No.
People who are professional composers very often make their music from educating or from consulting or from doing other things related to composing. But we have all sorts of different sources of income. And
Mm,
even after the composing is done, we creatively have the income from residuals. We have creatively the
mhm,
income from sheet music sales or from recording sales or from licensing of the music. So
mhm,
we still have all these other, and it's not the actively composing part that's making the money at that point.
mm,
So you can have a body of work that's still making you money while you're no longer actively composing.
mhm.
So that's another activity that's basically bringing in the money. Yeah, it's the money that's been brought in from a composition.
Yeah.
But if you're not composing, imposter syndrome is going to come along and say, well, you're not really a composer because you're not composing right now.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's this funny thing. And we're capable of being more than one thing at a time. This
Yes.
is something I think our culture has had a really hard time with from, at least the last 100 years or so. If somebody wasn't full time at a thing, they're not considered really to be that thing.
Okay.
When people get typecast, if somebody's an actor and then they try and go into some other field. It wasn't until recently, I mean, there was always been actors who are singers, but the people who are seen as actors who can sing have not been considered as good an actor as if somebody, was an actor who didn't sing. And the whole idea of being able to be more than one thing at a time, actually, you kind of see this snobbery about the people who only focus on the one thing in their life and that's the only thing they ever do. You
Mhm.
kind of see this sort of attitude about, well, that person has two things that they focus on, so they can't be as good at the one as they are at the other.
Hmm. That's a good observation. Do you think that that's starting to slowly dwindle away, though?
I think I think it's being a bit ameliorated by, I said that right, by the idea of social media and how now social media people are saying, look, I'm really interested in this, but I also happen to be doing social media and I happen to be,
Yeah.
they kind of say, I do these different things. And even in the music industry, there are a lot of people, especially after working for UMBS, I've met these people who are very much into fitness and also into music.
Mm,
And
mhm,
you'll see these pictures of them exercising or these pictures of them, out doing sports or whatever. And even in my own head, I feel trained to look at them and say, oh, well, look at how good they spend so much time on this other activity. How good can they really be
hmm,
at that activity?
mm,
And then, of course, in my own life, I have so many different things that I love to do that I
mhm.
think and a number of things I think I'm really good at. So,
Yeah,
am I a composer? Well, yeah, I'm a composer because I compose. Am I a
yeah,
web developer? Yeah, I'm a web developer because I make websites.
yeah.
Am I a podcaster? Yes, I'm a podcaster. And there's all these overlaps between the different things because the podcast is about music. The podcast uses technology that I learned doing website stuff. Part of the website stuff that I worked on, there used to be this program called Flash that worked very much like Premiere or any kind of an audio editor where you've got tracks and you
Mm,
make the things in the tracks do different things. It was an animation program primarily or an interactive program, but it still had tracks that you had to work with. And it had You had to like line things up and time things, and you'd move things around the same way as you do in audio and video editing.
Hmm.
So it was very easy for me to slip into this environment of doing editing because
Hmm.
I did this stuff that used to be website development.
Yeah.
So that they kind of
Yeah.
all overlap. And I always
Yeah.
tell people music and composing are both very left brain, so left brain, right brain activities. They
Hmm.
You need to have some technical ability
Hmm.
and technical skills in knowledge wise as well as physically to do music or composing. Music, composing involves math, whether you like it or not, and whether you realize it or not. You're
Hmm.
doing math when you're doing composing.
Yeah.
And playing requires math. It could be math that's as simple as counting 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
but you still have to count. So there's still math involved there, and there's still in your head, you might not be thinking this plus this equals that, but
Hmm.
you're looking, oh, it's 2 half notes, so it's a whole note. So you just did the same math in your head.
Hmm.
Are you a
Yeah.
mathematician? No, but you're doing math all the time in this stuff. And it still requires kind of both sides of your ability to be able to do those things. So you can be more than one thing.
Mathematician with a very lowercase m, right?
It's a tiny, tiny little M.
Tiny, tiny m. No, I'm glad you brought this up because this is one of the ideas and main foundational topics that I talk about through Flute 360 is that everything is connected, hence the circle 360. I cannot
Ah,
compartmentalize my life. I am not just a flutist. I'm not just a business owner. I'm not just, and then fill in the blank with all of the different hats I wear. It's all connected. What I learned from being a teacher informs me being a performer. What I do as being a podcaster informs what I do as a flutist, as a teacher, and it hones these skills, communication skills. I'm a much better teacher now because I'm a podcaster. And there's no shame in saying, I am, like what you're saying, I am for you, a website developer, a composer, a podcaster, and saying that out loud because actually more power to you. Because if you can notice, like, oh, the skills that I use being a website developer go in beautifully and seamlessly into being a podcaster, you can amplify that and you can really I don't know, spread your wings and dive into these different things that you're passionate about. And it feeds off of each other. And so I'm glad you brought up this portfolio career aspect and people really getting excited. And well, hopefully, I think that the industry is changing with this composer and flute and you weren't there, but the last National Flute Association convention was in Phoenix this past summer, 2023. And this is the first time that I've noticed out loud a lot of flutists owning that and saying, probably, I don't know if it was intentional or non intentional, but you heard the conversation steer in this direction where people weren't ashamed of saying, yeah, I'm a flutist and a waitress. Yes, I'm a flutist and I'm a mom. And there's no shame in saying these other identifiers because that's life. That's what we all not deal with, but we all can associate with to some degree. Right. And so, like before, I think even 5 years ago, it was kind of like this hush hush thing that, oh, I'm a flutist and a waitress. And so I'm hoping that this is starting to change in a healthy direction because if we can normalize this, then when you find yourself as a flutist or as a composer who's in a season where you may need to pick up extra gigs at the restaurant, right? Or you need to whatever to complement and supplement that portfolio career, you're not going to beat yourself down and think of yourself less than. You're not a lesser flutist just because you have to work some tables at the restaurant. If anything, you're
right,
being smart. It doesn't matter where the money comes in from. You're supporting
right.
yourself, your family, and maybe waitressing actually supports your flute endeavors where you can take on extra auditions or you can travel to these extra flute festivals because you have that extra stream of money coming in.
Yeah. And this is something, I've been guilty of this myself. I mean, I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, how if somebody said they were an actor, we would always joke and say, yeah, which restaurant?
Oh,
So
there you
I've
go.
been one of those cruel people who's like pointing out that if you say you are this
Mhm.
thing, are you really this thing? And that it's, again, I think it's kind of ingrained in me to the same mindset. I've got these things that I've been trained. So I've got my little grooves that I'm stuck in a lot of things. And I try to fight those. But a couple different things. One, I also earlier said that somebody, or that there's sort of a snobbery around people who do just one thing.
Mm.
And I've noticed that in a few situations where there's somebody who does that and, and feels that way, but I can't just make a blanket statement about that. It's a stereotype
Mm.
that isn't real, because I know some people who they are professionals and do what they do. And that's the only thing, that's their job, to
Mm.
do something in music along, somewhere, whether it's specifically performing on an instrument or composing or whichever thing like that. But and fantastic for them that they can do that, because it is more rare nowadays
Yep.
for somebody to be doing just one thing, particularly in something as interesting as music. And even people who are known as being greats at doing one thing very often still taught or still did something on the side. I mean, how many great classical composers that we think of were also doing accompaniment and also doing, had their students and so forth. So there is history of people doing multiple things. There are history of people who, have two complete jobs. Charles Ives was an insurance salesman, and
Yes.
he's considered one of America's greatest composers. So it's not impossible to do those two things. And Ed Wendell's is a composer, a friend of mine in New York. Ed Wendell's talks about being a 5 to 8 composer. Basically, he
Mm.
was working and had to have work to be able to survive and live, but he couldn't get work that was paying him enough to live if he was working completely in music. So he did music after he finished his 8-hour day.
Mm.
And he even promoted, look, don't feel bad about the fact that you need to have income to survive in our world. You have to
Mhm.
have money to be able to pay your bills and all that sort of stuff. So do what you have to do to make the money. But if you
Mhm.
want to compose, compose. Or if you want to play an instrument, play the instrument.
Mhm.
And maybe you'll have the opportunity to do that full time. Maybe you'll want to. Maybe you won't have that opportunity, or maybe you don't want to. And you can still consider yourself to be a flutist or a pianist or a composer or whatever of those different things you think of.
Mm.
And in the podcast interview that I just had, Tom Polche, one of the two songwriters, he said, if you can not find it in you to do more than the music work, if it's just not possible for you to look at your life and say, oh, I could do something else as well. If you're totally committed and totally like, you just can't not do it,
Mm.
then go into music professionally.
Mm.
But just doing one professional thing musically, just being a full timer, can be very, very hard.
Yeah.
And it can be a struggle to get the gigs and to get the work and so forth. It can be a struggle to do that.
Hmm.
But even if you can't do that, don't give up the idea of being that thing.
Yeah.
Don't give up the idea that you're a songwriter
Mhm.
because you're working in something else. Do the thing for, do creativity, do art for all the other benefits that it has.
Mhm.
It's, it's something that helps us psychologically. It helps us survive. It helps us feel better. It helps us make other people feel better.
Mm.
It's something that adds to our community and adds to our culture. Do it for those things, even if you're not doing it for the income. Don't give up that art.
Hmm.
But also, you have no reason to beat yourself up if you're not doing that thing as your full-time makes 100% of your money gig.
Yeah. But it's really interesting too what you're saying about like, flute and, right? Don't beat yourself up in this conversation here. I had this thought and it's escaping me. Hopefully it'll come back. But since I brought up your childhood, that nugget from the beginning, did you listen to, and I hope you didn't, because, and I know sometimes you do listen to Flute 360 podcast episodes, but if you didn't listen to the episode that went out 2 weeks ago, it was episode 261. I kid you not, I hope you didn't listen to it, but we were talking about finding your place in the community and what that means. And I was giving my listeners like 4 different activities to go through to really hone in and figure out like how they want to serve their people within the music community or outside of the music community based on our conversation. And one of the things I said was I had this huge aha moment when I talked with a friend and a composer, and his name is Christopher Caliendo. He just happens to be married. I don't know if you know of him. He was out in California and he moved recently to Arizona, but he happens to be married to my best friend, Kristen. Anyways, he had a conversation with me through 360 like 5 years ago. And then fast forward to a conversation I had with Michael Lynn and through Oberlin College. And his episode was like 245. Anyways, these two gentlemen, 5 years apart, episodes 5 years apart, completely said the same thing. And you just said it too. And I brought this like full circle moment in my head in this recent episode 261. And it was, look at these identifiers from your childhood. What are 3 to 5 things, 3 to 5 experiences, 3 to 5 people who really shaped and molded you, where you had such an impact, such an aha moment, something that you were drawn to? And if you lost sight of that as you're growing up and you're like, where am I? Where am I in this community? How am I serving? Go back and look at your origin roots. What is there? And so Christopher was saying basically in his episode, like he was really brought up and really took to comic books and old Western movies. And he's like, why am I not surprised? Look at the music that I'm composing now. That was my roots. And then Michael Lynn was talking about like these early period instruments like harpsichords and recorders being in the living room that his mom would put out. And he's like, I'm not surprised. I'm the early music professor at Oberlin. And my mind went, what? What? You know? And so anyways, when you just said that about the Muppets and Star Trek and all of that, I was like, he listened to episode 261, but I don't think you did.
No, I didn't. I have been, since the initial opportunity to do that episode of the podcast happened.
Yeah.
I have been obsessed about that episode. Not only in the planning for it and then like thinking, are they really going to come and do this interview? Are they really going to show up? Am I bothering them? What's going on? I had all of these doubts about the situation, whereas they were excited to be on the podcast. They were excited to talk about the music and the experience. And then it was all a wrap. And I scrambled really fast to get it out, and I put it out. And then since then, I've also been looking at how can I expand my marketing? What other channels can I do for marketing? Somebody had pointed out, this Star Trek musical episode has two little things: music, songwriting, and Star Trek. If you want to find communities that are very much those things, maybe go on Reddit and find a subreddit that's about those different things and join that subreddit and promote the podcast on there. And I also learned how to better make reels and shorts, basically small vertical format videos, which the tool I use, Riverside FM, creates them automatically with subtitles and everything. And also the Premiere software does that really nicely. So I'm able to make those. I learned about that. But in the past month, I have been focusing on pretty much nothing except for that episode of the podcast for whatever particular reason. So no, I did not listen to that particular episode, but it's an important thing to keep in mind. It's also, we have, for our own mental health, we have our identity of what we think of ourselves as being. My entire life, my identity has been wrapped around being a composer.
Okay.
So when I think of, if somebody says, what's the one thing, if you could pick anything else, that's the one thing that you identify yourself as, whether it's, to me, whether this is an incorrect assessment of myself or not, the one thing that I focus on is that I'm a composer. Now, this is kind of like my last name. The last name that I've Breur, it's a Dutch spelling of Breur.
Okay.
And I am 1/8 Dutch. So only 1/8 of my entire personality or my entire genetic background is Dutch, but I identify myself as being Dutch, partly because that's my last name.
Yeah.
But I think of myself, I have a Dutch appearance generally, as far as, the mutt that I am, I look more Dutch than anything else. And that's my identifier. I'm 1/8 of it, but I identify as a composer. Maybe I'm only 1/8 composer, but that's my primary identity in the things that I do. And that's perfectly fine. You can't beat yourself up for being a richer person than one identity or one particular thing. And I think having those different elements, yes, being somebody completely dedicated to one thing and one thing only makes you excellent at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be opportunity and there's going to be experience in that thing that's going to be hugely rewarding and hugely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, having other opportunities and other things that you are interested in, other things that you do. I mean, I can't imagine anybody who like lives, eats, sleeps, just playing their instrument, and all they do is they eat little protein bars to survive, and the rest of the time all they're doing is focusing on the music, because that's a machine, that's not a person.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
have to have emotional experiences to be able
Yep.
to work with music. And somebody who is a performer who's focusing entirely on their thing, they still have a life outside of playing their music. They still have relationships. They still have to walk to and from. They've got to transport themselves. Is their identity that I'm a walker or I'm a driver? Well, no, their identity is that they are, I'm a cellist and I play cello. You have to do other things in life other than sit at a cello. You're not connected to an IV and a catheter, so you can sit and do nothing except 24 hours except work on your instrument. You are not a Borg plugged into a port and doing everything that you do in one particular spot and nothing else in your entire life. We all have multiple facets and multiple dimensions that we live in. And some of us, partly because the way the world is now, but partly just because it's the way humanity is, we have bigger dimensions outside of our primary focus in what is a musical focus. So again, you have somebody who to pay the bills, they've got a day job, they've got some 9 to 5, or they are a full-time mom. They've got a situation where they have to be working at home taking care of multiple kids, or for whatever reason they're the person who's staying at home taking care of the children. That's a job.
It is.
That's a job.
Yes, it is.
That is more than a full-time job, because you don't get to leave it.
Just around the clock.
You only get to take breaks every now and then. So that's the kind of thing where you still have your music. You can still consider yourself to be that, but I think we are all enriched by having other opportunities that we are involved in. Science fiction and like the whole escapism that comes around, like all these fantastic movies and stories and things in my imagination, that is something that to me expands who I am. It makes me more of an interesting person, and it makes me somebody who has more experience and more interests, and I have more to draw from on my music too. If I get inspired by science fiction, I get inspired by even just reading science fiction, I get inspired by it, but then watching shows, I get inspired by those. I'm pretty sure it's in Stephen R. Covey, which is the very kind of stereotypical business mindset, improve yourself mindset stuff. But one of the things that I remember in one of those recorded lessons that I listened to years and years ago is, if you think of yourself as being a circle, think of you've got your area of knowledge and your area of experience and who you are. Everything grows out from the center of that circle. So if you extend yourself in one direction, you push yourself over in this direction, and you're learning this other thing, the circle is still going to be a circle. It's not going to misshape and become egg-shaped. It's going to stay a circle. So you push yourself in this other direction, your circle has to get bigger. And it gets bigger in all directions. So you don't just expand in the one direction you thought you were, I'm more this way. You actually expand yourself in all different directions. You widen yourself in 360 degrees by improving yourself in any particular direction. Focus on any particular skill, any particular knowledge, any kind of endeavor to improve yourself. You're not just improving in that direction. You're improving yourself overall.
Yes. Times 1,000. Yes. I kid you not. We are literally on the same wavelength. I have been talking nothing but circles and Venn diagrams the past 2 to 3 weeks through Flute 360. You and I are just like really in sync. You're gonna have to go back a few episodes and like come back full circle and be like, oh, that's why Heidi was getting really excited in my conversation with her, because everything is coming together beautifully. And we didn't even plan it. I love it. Oh, shoot. I could pick your brain about value and portfolio careers all day long. I'm going to have to respect your time and start wrapping this up. But as we are wrapping it up, since you are, and you mentioned that you are a website developer, you are going to be so kind and carve out time for myself and the other Flute 360ers and give us some website tips on September 30th, 2023 at 11 a.m. Central Time. And I'm so appreciative of you doing that, because a lot of 360ers right now are saying, hey, it's a new academic year. I want to bring in more gigs, more students, more families, more opportunities. And I know that my digital presence matters, and having a website that works for me and for my career matters to me. And so a lot of people right now are wanting to shake off the cobwebs and really clean up their site. And they want to do it right. They want to ask the right people, the people who have expertise in this field, and not waste their time with, like, am I doing this right? And all of that jazz. So through that website webinar, you are going to, can you give us a little like teaser about what's going down on 9:30, like what you like to focus on and what topics you like to bring up in conversations like that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, there's kind of 2 or 3 main things that I want to make sure people are aware of in this. One is you can do this yourself. You don't have to hire somebody and pay a bunch of money, because the tools nowadays exist to do all this stuff for you. And the tools are just getting better basically every minute at this point, it seems. So you can handle these things. You do not need to be stressed about what's going on. The next thing about that is you want to make sure what your website and your online presence do is promote what you want to be promoted for to the people who want to find you and can use your services. So you want to just make sure, for example, just on the website, that when somebody gets to your website, it's immediately apparent what you do, who you do it for, and how they can get in touch with you. So those are really the most important things, is make sure people can find out what you do, why they should talk to you, like why are you better than somebody else? What's your, thing that should draw people to you, who you really want to connect with, and then how you can connect. Those are kind of the most important parts of that, all of that. Also, as part of this, I mean, I'm going to be there live to present on this, but for everybody who's involved and everybody who's attending, I'm happy to have conversations after the fact and spend a little bit more time to make sure that you're comfortable with things. And if you have some questions that you don't get answered during that session, I'll still be available. I'm still providing that just as part of all of this, to make sure that everybody is covered and nobody feels like they're left out if there's lots of questions, or if there's a lot of information that we go over and we don't get to specifically what somebody else is asking for. But I've been doing this for a long, long time. And really, the whole point has not changed about what you're trying to do.
Okay.
You're basically trying to connect you to somebody else who is the right person that you want to connect to.
Okay.
And how do you do that? And a website is a big part of that, because it's your own property online that you completely control, that you decide what's on that property and what people see and how they interact with you in that space. That's like really the one thing online that you kind of really totally own yourself, is if you have a website at your domain, that you manage it yourself and you control it. Because yeah, you can have social media presence, but you're on a channel. You're on Instagram, or you're on YouTube, or
It's
you're on whatever. And right now there's just so many people talking about the algorithm in YouTube, that like they're a slave to doing what YouTube wants them to do to be able to survive on YouTube.
Okay.
But yeah, it's borrowed. You're living, and we all know what's going on with Twitter right now. I mean, I just feel like I've lost, it's gone from being happy playland to being a scary, scary place that every time I go in there, I end up coming away feeling depressed and stressed out.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to replace that, but that's another example of a place that I was promoting myself that's going away. And that's, it doesn't belong to me. My presence there is rented. But a website,
your website is your digital real estate. It's your digital real estate.
Yeah. It's the real estate that you own. It's yours.
Yeah. I
And
love
as
that.
long as you own that domain, as long as you maintain that website, that spot belongs to you and you can completely control it. You can send people to there and it's got your name or your brand on it.
Mhm.
It's yours. And yes, all the other things are important and they all work together. But
Yep.
that's the one little spot that really is your own personal real estate. And that's why I think that having a website's important. Can you get along without it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does it still amaze me when people who are professionals and have all this stuff out there
And
don't
no
have a website?
website.
It always stuns me when that happens. But
Yeah.
at the same time, some people, either don't feel that they need to have that.
Mm.
Some people, if they already are established in a certain situation, they may not need to do it. And they don't want to focus on it. And they have enough other connections or other routes. But if you are still trying to reach out to people, if you're still trying to build what you do and you're still trying to grow, a website, like I say, it's yours. It's your spot.
Mm.
And it can have all the stuff that you want to have and do the things you want it to do.
Awesome. Well, I cannot wait for September 30th. I sure hope you are going to, in these next 2 weeks, wrap your mind around being in a room full of flutists. So get ready because
Oh no!
it's going to be a
Now
fun
you've got me
time.
picturing like a room full of minions that are all Heidi.
Oh no. Well, I don't know if we need that, but
I am completely ready for it. I am looking
awesome.
forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun and I've got a lot of friends who are flutists and I work with a lot of people who are flutists. So
Good.
just a room full of flutists does not scare me. I've had
Good.
eight people on flute staring at me at the same time
Yeah.
in the concert band because I wrote, parts for them that they're like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, if you guys are interested and you want to reach out to Arthur and pick his brain about composition, his pieces for flute, you can go to arthurbreur.com and he also has his website, firespike.com. Thank you so much, Arthur, for your time, and we will talk soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. If you want to be a part of a flute community that you can call your own, please join me and other 360ers in our private Facebook group. Here, we hold discussions that matter to you, share our latest victories, and support each other through our musical endeavors. All you have to do is click the link below to join our private Facebook group called Flute 360 Family. Thanks! Let's talk about flute.